Alright, yeah, I know. I'm late to the party on this one, but we probably won't be getting any news about this game for a while, so let's speculate. Nintendo decided to drop another bombshell during their E3 2019 Direct in the form of this short teaser trailer for the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is no doubt one of my favorite games of all time. And I'm sure some of you can say the same. Breath of the Wild was exactly the type of shakeup the Zelda franchise needed after the hand-holdy crapshoot that was Skyward Sword. It's more like Zelda 1 than any other entry in the franchise, with its huge emphasis on finding your own path through the world. A huge world at that, one that has secrets hidden around every corner for players to dig up with their abilities, a trait that many other open-world games find trouble with. It's basically the perfect open-world game in my opinion, so where do you go from here? That's what I'm here today to answer. Here are 7 things that I think Breath of the Wild 2 can improve over its predecessor. Starting with what we've already been shown in the teaser trailer, this game will definitely be a lot darker in tone than the original. The trailer plays out like a horror movie as Link and Zelda trek their way through an underground cavern, only to find what seems to be the mummified body of Ganondorf being held back by a mysterious glowy hand. Which leads me into my first thing. Breath of the Wild 2 needs a more involved and complex story than the original. Breath of the Wild tells its story in a very interesting way already, having all the major plot points happening canonically before the player even gains control of Link. As you ventured across Hyrule, you would discover these memories, each of which involved a short cutscene showing Link's memories of 100 years ago, before Calamity Ganon took over Hyrule Castle. It really made you feel like Link piecing together all his memories after waking up in the Shrine of Resurrection. Everything that happens in the main game, however, is funneled towards one goal: defeat Calamity Ganon. And while this was still great, I couldn't help but yearn for a more involved story, one that happens on a more traditional timeline. With Link supposedly regaining all his memories by the end of Breath of the Wild, it's safe to assume he'll keep those memories going into Breath of the Wild 2, so there shouldn't be any need for that kind of storytelling anymore. With Link and Zelda supposedly continuing their journey across Hyrule they set out in the 100% ending of Breath of the Wild, they come across this cave with dehydrated Ganon. Shit goes south, and Ganon escapes. The game's story could then encompass Link and Zelda chasing down Ganon across Hyrule as he slowly regains his own memories, similarly to Link in the first game. Another poignant theory worth discussing is that this Ganondorf was actually a previous Zelda's hero depicted in this mural of the fight against the Calamity 10,000 years ago. I'm sure any story they land on will be great, but I'm honestly just hoping for more cutscenes. Anything that gives us more insight into who these characters are is a good thing in my book. With series director Aonuma basically confirming this game will be darker than Majora's Mask, I'm definitely hoping for some more shocking stuff to come out of Breath of the Wild 2's story. Oh, and the whole castle coming out of the ground thing, that probably plays into it at some point. Moving forward, I feel it's safe to assume that this game will reuse the map of Hyrule for the sequel. A lot of people are hoping for a Termina-like new map to explore, but I don't think it's necessary. Using the same Hyrule could be a huge opportunity to show us how this world has evolved between the times of the first and second games. New towns could have popped up, or even new structures in existing locations. This may be the same Hyrule, but it's not exactly the same, pushing players to scour the entire map once more to see all the new changes. But with these new changes comes a new tone to the world as well. Keeping with the darker tone of this game, it could all seem very great and happy and new on the surface, but a great evil is stirring in the shadows, causing all sorts of problems to deal with. With the resurrection of Ganondorf comes a more involved Yiga clan, maybe infiltrating small towns to tilt them to their will. Monsters in the wild could increase in numbers, and strange occurrences could occur all across Hyrule. This is the second thing. Same Hyrule, darker tone. And with this darker tone could come more of the horrifying Zelda enemies they've come up with over the years. I'm looking at you, Dead Hand. You are not meant for children. Why are you in a children's game? So Breath of the Wild didn't deliver much in terms of standard enemy variety. as it basically had like 3 main types: your bokoblins, your moblins, and the Lyssalfos. Wizrobes would pop up every now and then, and yeah, you had your bigger enemy types like the Stone Taluses, the Guardians, and the Hinox, along with those teeny tiny guys with the Keese and Octoroks and the Choo-Choo. But in terms of what you end up fighting most of the time, there wasn't a lot of variety. Discovering a Lynel for the first time was definitely exciting, but I never felt that same level of excitement in terms of enemy types after the first 10 or so hours of playing. Where's the Armo statues, the Darknuts, the Gibdos? I always loved having enemies who needed a specific strategy to beat them other than just wailing away with your sword, and Breath of the Wild was kind of lacking that. Having to cut off the armor of the Darknuts in Wind Waker is still the best implementation of that enemy type in the series. So I'd like to see more enemies like that, okay Nintendo? Okay, some of them don't even have to appear in the overworld. You can just delegate them to a specific dungeon. Oh shit, I didn't get there yet. Well, the fourth thing is all about adding in some more traditional dungeons of old. As interesting as the Divine Beast dungeons were, with the whole rotating room part thing and such, I'm still hoping that Breath of the Wild 2 has some more traditional Zelda-style dungeons, as honestly, I just miss them. As great as the Divine Beast dungeons played, each one looked exactly the same on the inside. In fact, that goes for the shrines too. They all had this whole stone infused with blue lines type look, which I totally understand from a development side of things, as they didn't need to focus so much on the aesthetics of each dungeon, so they could put all their time into the puzzles and how Link would move through them. But seeing as they don't have to make an entirely new engine and world from scratch, they definitely have the time to give each of the dungeons their own themes. And can we walk away from the stereotypical forest, fire, water temples? I'd like to see some more unique themes moving forward, or at least change up those stereotypical themes into something a bit more interesting, like say Majora's Mask. Yeah, they were technically forest and water temples, but each one had a very different art style than what we'd seen before. Snowhead Temple and the Stone Tower Temple are still some of my favorites in the series, as they were wholly original for the series at that time, and I want more of that. Each dungeon could utilize a different rune or item that Link finds along his journey, not tucked away to only be used in said dungeon. And speaking of runes and powers, in terms of your classic Zelda items, Breath of the Wild was pretty sparse on upgrades. Basically, you'd get all the runes you'd need to beat the game on the Great Plateau, and aside from health and stamina upgrades and the different powers from beating each Divine Beast, there wasn't much else. Which is fine. Having all the items right away played well into the choose-your-own-adventure style the game was going for, as there were no areas that were unreachable. Some areas, like Death Mountain and the constant rain in the areas surrounding Zora's domain, did limit your mobility in some way, but for the most part, all of the game's areas are accessible after leaving the plateau. But there was definitely some part of me that missed some of the more trademark items of the series. Sure, you had your bombs, your bows, your boomerangs, and the elemental rods, but where's the hammers, the mirror shields, the hook shot? Damn it! It's the best item in all the games. Just give me a Breath of the Wild 2 hook shot. Sorry, I really love the hook shot. But you can't doubt that Breath of the Wild lacked the more unique items of Zelda's past, and I'm hoping that this changes this go around. In the teaser trailer, for a split second, you can see Link's hand absorb some of the green glowy hand energy, which this alone is not very noteworthy, but put it next to this concept art from Breath of the Wild, and we could be looking at the game's new mechanic. Link's hand changing into whatever item he needs at the time. And what do you know? The hook shot is one of those highlighted items. It could even work like Ravio's shop in A Link Between Worlds, in that you'll need to buy a certain item to gain access to each of the dungeons. You could even take it one step further and have players craft these items with Guardian parts. Which leads me into my next point. Man, I gotta tell you, these transitions are on point. Breath of the Wild did have some sort of crafting system in terms of cooking and upgrading armor at fairy fountains, but I think we can get even more in depth with these systems. The teaser trailer shows Link still rocking his champion's garb from the first game, but with a couple notable additions. You can see that Link now has a leather chestplate. This could just be an aesthetic change, but I think it hints at something deeper. Instead of upgrading armor at a fairy fountain, with the armor going through no visual changes whatsoever, what if you gave Link the ability to craft these upgrades on his own with the materials he finds along his adventure, with each upgrade changing the appearance of that armor set ever so slightly each time? Not only would this add a more tangible sense of progression, but it would really deepen each player's relationship with whatever armor set they choose to upgrade. Maybe more passive buffs would appear over each upgrade, like the stealth suit increasing in effectiveness with each upgrade. This would also give a little bit more purpose to materials instead of just handing them over to someone else for something else in return. It gives Link, and by proxy the player, more agency in when and how they want to upgrade their armor sets. I also thought about weapon crafting, but that idea kind of clashes with the whole breakable weapons system of the first game, as why would players want to craft weapons only for them to break eventually? So weapon crafting is a no-go, but repairing weapons is a whole new story. If you happen to stumble into any of the blacksmiths located on the map, they could repair a near-broken item back to peak performance, so you don't have to go track down another great flame blade if yours is seconds away from shattering. This would keep intact the improvisational nature of combat, as if you're in the wild, you can't repair weapons, but would add an extra layer of attachment to each individual weapon you find. Just like Hannah Montana, it's the best of both worlds. But to round out this video, I've got one final addition that alone would push this game far above what Breath of the Wild ever was, and that is the simple action of making Princess Zelda a playable character. And I'm not talking some Mary Jane mission level of playable, I mean you can play through the whole game as the princess herself. This is The Legend of Zelda after all. From a gameplay perspective, I think Link and Zelda would have to play relatively the same, but with their own specific quirks. In Breath of the Wild, Zelda is depicted as a strong character in her own right. She's shown to be very smart, and she's single-handedly held back Calamity Ganon for 100 years while Link was off burning fields to the ground for fun. And after Breath of the Wild, we can just assume that Link taught her how to fight with weapons and that she's just as good as Link come the time of the sequel. For every item Link crafts for his crazy hand powers, Zelda could use her knowledge of Sheikah technology to craft a similar item for herself to use. Basically, they would function the same for gameplay purposes, but they would have their own ways of doing things. Or you can even make some Link-specific sections and some Zelda-specific sections and make it so you can swap between the two at any time, really pounding the idea that they are on this adventure together into your skull. Seeing playable Zeldas and Breath of the Wild mods just makes this idea all the more tantalizing. Playable Zelda, Nintendo. That's all you gotta do. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. 7 ways that Breath of the Wild 2 can surpass its predecessor. What did you think of my additions? Are there any more that you would add? If so, hit up those comment sections and tell me what you want to see in Breath of the Wild 2. And while you're down there, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to be notified of my latest uploads. Until next time. Ending the video with a fart joke. Quality content.